Hey guys, and welcome. We are the Strong and Chatty Chicks. We chat about women's health and fitness, and we aim to inspire and empower one chat at a time. I am Yvonne Alonso. I am a personal trainer of 17 years and a plant-based nutritionist.
And I'm Paula Headley. I have 20 years experience as a medical scientist and I'm a public health expert.
We're going to be talking about cyclical fitness, what it is, and is it relevant for you? Subjects like this are a hot topic in the fitness community right now.
Yeah, this is the new thing.
It is a new thing. You're going to be hearing about it, cyclical fitness or cycle syncing,
Yeah.
it can also be called. And we think it's a very interesting topic. We have discussed this in our live Instagram chats.
Yeah, and it's something that we're applying ourselves to our own workout. So it's a relevant thing to be talking about for sure.
Yes.
Right?
However, we also want to discuss about, is this actually relevant for you where you are in your fitness journey? Because as Paula has informed me, there isn't that much research on it.
No, so there is a limited amount of research on this in any event. So when we talk about women's sports and research within women's sports, there is limited research. And within this area, there's, of course, very, very limited research. And I think most importantly to our discussion, because we're talking to kind of people broadly, the research has been performed primarily on elite athletes. And I'm certainly not an elite athlete, and I would say that most people listening are probably not elite athletes. So then the question is, how relevant is it for you?
Mm-hmm.
And something that we were discussing a little bit earlier is that if we take kind of, a large group of women, those that are training are probably not training like men in any event. And cyclical fitness is kind of the answer to that.
Yes.
If you're an elite athlete and you are training as men would train in the same sport, then probably you should be looking at your menstrual cycle. If, however, you are just training for yourself, the vast majority of women are underfed and underrested. And they should be addressing those things.
Yes.
And then there will be another much larger group of women who are not training at all, and we don't want those women to feel encumbered by having to also then add this kind of cyclical information into their training. But we'll talk about it. Do you want to maybe introduce what cyclical fitness is?
Sure.
And before we get too far into it.
So, cyclical fitness in broad terms is basically matching your health, nutrition, and fitness style to your menstrual cycle. It's also good to note that personal sensitivity to hormonal fluctuations may differ from person to person, and that's why it's something that it may be relevant for you if you feel that you have these fluctuations throughout your cycle. Where
if you're sensitive to it.
Yeah, if you're sensitive to it and you feel like I'm just not as strong this week as I was last week. And instead of taking it as a defeat, to actually start to see if you're tracking your
cycle,
is there a pattern here? And then you're prepared that week perhaps is not the week to do PRs. It's maybe a week to focus on something else.
Focus on your form or just focus on just movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for many people who might feel discouraged at certain times in their cycle, then it makes sense to track your cycle. In fact, I think it makes sense to track your cycle anyway. If you have a menstrual cycle, then tracking it makes sense just broadly because it can tie into other health issues. But if you're tracking your cycle and you're tracking your fitness performance, then you can decide for yourself if cycle syncing matters to you. Like if you notice a real change in your kind of performance level in certain weeks, then you should probably be applying some kind of menstrual kind of considerate training plan. Mm-hmm. But just to kind of reintroduce the menstrual cycle, I sort of expect that most people listening will know, but that's not necessarily true. We've seen those videos of men being asked about women's physiology. But just to kind of go back through what is the menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle is the kind of that cycle which allows for the thickening of your uterine or your endometrial lining with the uterine wall, which then sloughs off when you have your period. And that sounds quite simple, but it requires the coordinated effort of a number of hormones. And we're going to talk about estrogen and progesterone largely, but they are not the only hormones at play here, but they're the ones who kind of matter when we're talking about cyclical fitness. So if we start your menstrual cycle from the first day of your period, which would be the ordinary way to kind of calculate that or to talk about that. So the first day that you bleed, that will be day 1 of the cycle, and then your next kind of bleeding. So that until that point, so from bleeding to the next cycle, that's your 1 cycle. Ordinarily, that would be like on average 28 days, but the spread of the duration of a menstrual cycle is quite broad. During your menstrual phase, so during the kind of the bleeding, your period itself, your estrogen and your progesterone levels are extremely low, and that's what kind of causes your uterine lining to slough off and then to bleed. Effectively, these hormones drop so that you can't maintain that lining anymore, and it sloughs off and it bleeds out. So during that time, you might feel like crap because you are low on hormone, and also you're cramping. It's not a very nice time. So after the period, though, you have the follicular phase, which is where your estrogen levels, they're going to start to rise, and you might feel more energetic, also because you're not bleeding and cramping, so you don't feel like crap, but you might feel better and stronger, more energetic and stronger. And within the kind of the cyclical fitness or cycle syncing theory, this would be a good time for high intensity workouts and strength training. Then after your follicular phase, so the follicular phase just means that your ovaries actually are developing the follicle that's going to become the egg. And then during ovulation, your ovaries are going to release that egg, and your estrogen levels are going to peak. So if you don't feel like crap because you're ovulating, which you might feel extremely energetic and really very strong. So you might feel great. If you're not experiencing kind of cramping or feeling poorly because of the ovulation itself, you might feel really good, and then absolutely high intensity workout, and you're going to probably be pushing your PRs at that time. So following your ovulatory phase, you start your luteal phase, which is like a 2-week phase. And if you ever look at like the kind of the map of the hormones as they rise and fall, to call the luteal phase 1 phase is a bit silly because clearly those hormones change. But effectively, immediately following ovulation, your estrogen levels are going to drop, and then they're going to start to rise again. But more importantly, you see this rise in the progesterone levels at that time. So you might feel tired, your metabolic rate is going to go up, your body temperature is going to go up. So yeah, you might not feel so comfortable. You might be bloated, you might start cramping, and you're going to start to see PMS symptoms towards the end of that luteal phase as you're heading towards your period again. So this might be a good idea to kind of hold back a little bit on your kind of PR, your pursuit of a PR, and do things that are a little bit lower intensity. But again, you need to kind of check in with yourself. Like, you might feel great and that's wonderful for you, but check in with your own body. So at the end of the luteal phase, your menstruation is going to start again, and again your hormones are going to drop, and so the cycle will start again. So the idea of cyclical fitness is to go track where you are within your cycle and then train appropriately. And like we were saying, most of the information, most of the scientific data in this comes from elite athletes, and that's because any kind of percentage gain in performance is kind of the difference between winning and losing at a high level. So it makes total sense for a professional athlete to be incorporating this into their training. The question is, does it make sense for you or I?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is something that we're testing ourselves, right?
So is it relevant for you to incorporate the cyclical fitness into your workout routine? Well, that is really the question, because it is just like a menstrual cycle. It is very individual. Yeah. Some women will experience like these fluctuations. They will feel them much more than others. If you feel that it is relevant for you, then I would say go for it. I think the most important thing is, if you are tracking, we recommend tracking your cycle for many reasons, not just because of your workouts, but as Paula mentioned, it could be linked to other health issues, right? And when you track your cycle, this is where you can, if you are trying to get it to an elite, sub-elite, like you said, level of training, it can give you an edge on your training.
If you want to compete, then for sure you should be doing that.
Yeah. However, if you are a beginner or intermediate where you are training and you might be following a simple program, and that's great. I think there is much more to be gained by, first of all, just learning to practice what you call progressive overload, which is every week trying to go a little bit heavier, add a rep, for example. So learning how to apply progressive overload in general, as well as you mentioned, nourishing your body,
Yeah. Eat appropriately
eat
for what you want to
appropriately,
do. Yeah.
exactly, eating enough, and getting enough rest, recovery, sleep.
Yeah.
Like that is really, I would say, as if you have those, if you start to get those foundations in place, that's where you will start to see a bigger difference
For
in
sure.
your health, fitness, stamina, energy, mental health.
Absolutely.
Then
Even your
adding
experience of the
this.
menstrual cycle could be changed by having sufficient rest and eating appropriately. So I think that cyclical fitness is kind of a hot topic right now, and I think it's great that people are talking about it, and it's
Yeah.
important to understand that women's bodies are not just smaller men's bodies in all kinds of contexts. I'm all for that. But I think that for a woman who is sitting at home wondering how to get started, I would recommend checking in with her own body, eating appropriately, sleeping appropriately, and then just moving the way that she wants to move her body,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Like I've been tracking my workouts, and my cycle for that matter. Not necessarily because of my workouts, but I've been tracking my workouts for years, almost 2 decades. Like I have notebooks that go back
Yeah.
to many years. And I've been doing that because I found it helpful for me to write little notes to myself to remind myself of, I was feeling low energy today, even though I was supposed to, maybe I had programmed that I was going to hit some sort of PR that week. Second day of my period, not
It's
going to
not going to
happen.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Or I have back pain that week, or I have shoulder issues that week, whatever it may be. I found it helpful to be able to go back and see these things and then
Yeah.
kind of adjust
Yeah.
accordingly.
And if you track that, so you track your kind of your exercise output, your performance alongside your cycle, you will quite quickly start to see if there is a trend there that you need to address.
Absolutely. Um, in the case of tracking Paula's workouts with her cycle, it became relevant because Paula has endometriosis.
That's right.
And so, with every week, depending on where she is in her cycle, she is triggered. Her endo flares are triggered.
Yeah.
So it makes much more sense to follow her cycle with her fitness.
Yeah, and I encourage anybody to track. I think even if you're not looking to work out and you're not looking to improve your exercise performance, tracking your cycle does give you kind of the freedom to talk about certain health issues with your doctor in a meaningful way. So I would encourage that anyway. But I think for today, if we want to round up, I think that it is important for us to understand how the menstrual cycle affects our athletic performance and our fitness levels, of course, because it also ties into injury risk. But it's important to kind of track those things, but not at the expense of your kind of mental health or at the expense of you actually just working out. Like if this is harder for you to do than just kind of getting out the door and going for a walk or just turning the music on and having like a little dance around the house, get out the door and go for a walk, turn on the music and have a little dance. This is something that you should be putting on top of a training program that you are already active in.
Yeah. And if you feel that it's relevant for you.
And only if it's relevant for you, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no reason to add more of a burden on to women who are already, in many cases, overburdened. So, like we said, track your menstruation, track your workouts. You can be an active participant in understanding your body and kind of using that information to your benefit. I think overall, as ever, it's important to listen to your body, adapt as needed in all contexts. It doesn't have to be cycle related. It could just be that on one day you're not feeling great, then adapt. It's okay. Every woman's body is different and we are going to experience different fluctuations and we need to kind of appreciate that. So we will be posting, as I said, we're posting about my workout journey and cyclical fitness. So please follow along there on Instagram. We'll try and kind of put as much information into that's relevant.
Thank you for listening, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends, share it with them if you enjoyed the episode. Follow us on Instagram at Strong Chatty Chicks. Stay strong.
Stay chatty.
Bye.
Bye.